Well, hey, Josh, thank you so much for being willing to do this interview. And why don't we just start off with you just telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Man, it's good to be with you. Thanks for having me. Excited to hang out. I am in New England right now. I started a church in 2008 called Next Level Church. We started with 12 people and a dream in our heart, least church region of America. And so it's definitely not the place, they call it the pastor's graveyard. And so I heard something like 93% of church plants die within the first 3 years. Yeah, but I don't know who really comes up with those stats. So I don't know how true that is, but that's what I heard. And so, I pastor that church. We started in 2008. I was an underdog, never went off to Bible school the typical way. Nobody ever said like, this guy's going to go off and do big things for Jesus. I just wanted to start a church where my basketball playing friends would want to go. And we have many locations now, all throughout New England and now in the South in Florida. I'm married to my wife, Jennifer. We have two boys, Malachi and Nehemiah. We made sure we named them Christian names. They could be really like Jesus. And
Nice.
yeah, we'll see if that works. It's kind of corny to think that all kinds of Christians do that. So I like those names, but I do think it's kind of corny that we do that. That's about it. I mean, I like golf. I like my wife. I like the church I lead, and I try to do life in an authentic way because I think that's when we're most like Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely want to dive more into that story from being an underdog and starting with 12 people to where you are today. And I know you wrote a book recently called It's Not Over. And I know you basically the whole book is about people's dreams and how to go after your dreams, what to pursue, what not to, why not to give up. And I just want to dive into this. So we'll just start broadly and then dive into a little bit of your story. Why did you write this book?
Yeah, I wrote the book because let me tell you really where the title of the book. The editors didn't take this, like, you know how when you write a book, the editors go in and they take what they want, beat it up. I don't know why they didn't take this part of the book, because I thought this was on point. But whatever, they're the professionals. People like the book, and so they know what they're doing. But I'll tell you where the title came from. My friend was a pastor of a church, and he was a pastor for 20 years. Just a great guy, very close friend of mine. And he made a horrendous mistake, a mistake that I don't condone, one that I think should end you up in prison, and it did. And I'm for him being in prison. He made a horrible mistake, and of course, no longer a pastor. And he went to prison, and here I am watching this guy who made about a 30-minute mistake that now defines his forever. And everybody swims downhill because now he's the pastor who made this horrible mistake, and we don't want to be associated with him. I feel like when everybody swims downhill, it's the opportunity for Christians to swim upriver, right? When everybody swims, so I was swimming upriver and just loving on him. And so I was the first person to ever visit him in prison. And it's the first day he could have a visitor, I was there. And we sat down, and for 2 hours, we talked about life. And he was just like, I can't believe this. How did I end up here? I have 2 daughters. My wife, the heaviness of that moment. We're sitting at table number 7, and we're just talking. And then after we get done talking, I hug him, and we're allowed to hug for 3 seconds. And I just squeezed him, and I said, "It's not over." And he said, "I'm not sure I believe that." And when I got in my car, I was driving home, and those words were like just so heavy on my heart that anybody could ever live truly believing their best days are behind them, and that their future is now simply just a shadow their future is now gonna have to live underneath the shadow of their past. Like, I was so disrupted in my spirit. So as I'm driving, I'm seeing people pump gas. I'm seeing people ride bikes on the road. I'm seeing people in their lawn. And I just felt like each person I saw, I was carrying this spiritual weight of brokenness, wondering, are they believing that? Like, what if we live in a world right now, which I'm not going to say, I think we do. We live in a world right now where most people are just limping through life, wounded by their past. I went to a zoo in Florida with my kids, and they were like, "Dad, there's a bald eagle, come and see it." And I talk about this in the book, and we run over to see the bald eagle, and it's just chilling on a stump. And I thought it was like a robotic one at first. What's it doing? And I read a sign that said it's been injured and can no longer fly. And once again, I sat there and I just stared at this bird that was once the king of the sky. It flies 10,000 miles. You think 10,000 feet in the air. Like when a plane says you can now use electronic devices, that's what that bird, look out your window. That's what the bird can see. 10,000 feet high, spots its prey from that distance. This king of the sky is now in a zoo, sitting on a stump, injured, wondering what it would be like to fly again. And once again, that heaviness of thinking how many people, how many leaders are now living their life grounded, yet God has called us to soar. And the reason we live grounded is because the past has talked us out of the potential of the future. The truth is none of us are born with a dream life that's grounded. We are taught that our dreams should be grounded by the wounds of the past.
Wow. Such a powerful premise. I'm curious to ask you, my pastor, all throughout our 20s and constantly told us, like, listen, if you have a dream and a God-given dream, it's going to die multiple times. Like, he's like, I'm just telling you, there's going to be days where you just want to throw in the towel, give up. And so since we kind of started there, one, have you ever experienced that, the death of your dream from church planting to where you are now? And what was that experience like? And then from that, can you just encourage people who may be like your friend sitting in this place of, my dream's dead. I thought God was going to use me in significant ways, and now that's never going to happen. So I just might as well crawl into a hole and just stay there.
Yeah, I've never had a dream that didn't die. I don't think. Or at least I don't know if I've ever had a dream that didn't seem dead. I'll give you two of them really quick that are really close to my heart.
Yeah.
So I told you I was a basketball player. I was just an athlete in school. I went to school so that I could play sports. And so when I went off to college, I played college basketball, and I didn't go off to Bible school. Yet when I came home, my mom said, "Hey, there's a pretty girl at the church. You should go to church." I was like, fair enough. And so I go to church with my mom, and trying to see this pretty girl. Next thing I know, I'm running the soundboard at the church. I had never been to Bible school. I'm running the sound. I never ran a soundboard, but we know in the church, if you have like fingers, you're the sound guy, right? It's like you can do the sound.
That's right.
And so, I'm running the soundboard, never been to Bible school. I'm sweeping for youth group, we called it. I'm sweeping every Wednesday and getting the room ready. I'm just serving. And I felt like my heart for the things of God were just swelling. But every time I'd bring friends to church that were unchurched, they'd be like, yeah, man, it's not for me. And I'm not putting down that church at all, but it was not geared towards people who had never been inside of a gathering. It just wasn't geared for that, which is fine. Not every church needs to be. That's a vision thing. For me, it wasn't geared to that. And so, I'd bring pet friends in. They were like, yo, I don't know. I'm not interested in that. And so my heart started to break fast. So I started taking schooling online. I didn't tell anybody. I was watching preaching online, right? Never told, or not online, on television. And I never told anybody. And I'd be in my car preaching the lights out. Like just burning inside of me. I'm like giving altar calls. I'm crying at stoplights. Like nobody, and I'm like, no, you never have preached a message in my life. God's doing this in me. So I say all that to say, we're on the 10th hole of a golf course with my pastor, just me and him. And this would be the first time I tell anybody in my life that I feel called, that I'm taking Bible courses, that I feel called to preach the gospel. And I tell the pastor, and I was running a drywall company at the time, my dad's, and he goes, I said, I really feel called. He goes, I think you should stick with drywall. So I was like,
man.
So that's the first person I ever opened my heart up to tells me I couldn't do it. And so that could have crashed the dream. Like that's a moment where that dream felt dead. And now we pastor a church, with a lot of people.
How did you respond to that? Because some people that would cripple them and they would just stick with the drywall.
Yeah, it did cripple me. It embarrassed me. I'm a super insecure man. I struggle with insecurity. I've never felt good enough. I always feel unqualified. I am unqualified. And so it wounded me. But the thing about a God-sized dream is it doesn't go away, right? So it didn't just go away because he spoke those words of death. A dream that was built inside of me, for me, by me, it can easily be put out by a little bit of scattered water from others. But a dream that's deep inside your soul, that's been birthed by God, It's something that the sprinkling of water from somebody's voice can't easily put out. Now it can distract us, it can discourage us, and it can cause us to kick the can down the road and never step into it. But you're still going to feel it in there. And so, we continue to move forward, and he's been to next level plenty of times, and it's kind of a joke. We have thousands of people, so he's, and God's done a great work, and so it's just kind of funny. He's like,
Do you bring him on stage and be like, "What's up"?
Yeah, I haven't done that.
I'm just joking. Yeah.
So that's next weekend. But and so that's the first thing. But about the book, it's not over. Another time. So this is another dream, and a lot of leaders can relate to this. That was that first dream. Felt dead. I had to keep pursuing it. And there was many times in the story of Next Level, I've cried in bathrooms wondering if it's all over. We haven't had resources to continue. Like don't fear opposition. Embrace opposition, because any dream worthy of chasing is going to have the recipe of opposition. That just comes with a God-sized dream. And so with the book, It's Not Over, here we are now in New England, least church region of the country. An agent reaches out to me and says, "Hey, listen, have you ever thought about writing a book?" I was like, yeah, I mean, I write content every weekend, and people hear it for 30 minutes, don't remember it 10 minutes later. It'd be nice to put it on paper so that it outlives the weekend, So he's like, we'll get a book deal, God, blah, blah, blah. And so we go to every major publisher, and every single publisher is like, no. Finally, he gets back to me, says the last publisher said every lead's dried up. He's like, we're not getting a book deal. I'm like, why? He's like, they say because you're in New England. It's the least church region of America, and they sell the least amount of Christian books in that region. They're afraid of signing an author in that area. I was like, man. And man, I tell you, that's when it felt dead, right? So a year later, another agent reaches out. Hey, have you thought about writing a book? I read that email, and I did not get back to that for 1 year. For 1 year, I didn't get back to that email. But yet, once again, that fire in me wouldn't go out. So a year later now, I finally write back to Alex, who's my agent. I write back to Alex and I say, okay, I'm interested in talking now. He said, what took you so long? I said, I didn't want to face the fear of rejection and failure again. Like, I can remember when I found out that everything was a no the first time, I cried. I didn't tell my wife. I was embarrassed. I felt like a failure. I really believed it was of God. And when nothing opened up from it, I couldn't understand. Like, it shook me. And he's like, well, listen, let's go after it again. And then this next time we got 6 offers from all, the biggest Christian publishers. And here's what I learned, though, that God's delays are not God's denials, and that God often prepares us in the field so that he can promote us to the palace. And I had to understand that. Like, I had to understand that while I saw it as dead time, God was doing more in me in the last few years than he could have done through me had I not been through that valley. Like, the book, It's Not Over, wasn't going to be that book. That wasn't even the book we tried to get done a few years ago. It was a completely different book that would have stunk. But this book now is it's a better book because I allowed God to do something in me. So I would just say to all leaders, I think we have to embrace the seasons in the shepherd's field. And here's the thing. It's in the shepherd's field that we're prepared for what God has already prepared for us. And I often forget that because I think I belong in the palace. I think that I've been gifted for the palace. But the reality is it wasn't that David's giftedness. It wasn't that David wasn't gifted for the palace. It was that he had to embrace the shepherd field in order to get to that place. And so never underestimate what God's doing in you in every season so that he can someday do through you what you would only imagine he would do. And I love this part. If we're going to talk about David, let me throw this in right quick. I love this part. This is for all leaders listening that want to move on to something different someday. Okay? Don't miss this. This is for every leader. It's not even in the book. This is not book stuff. This is just a thought. For every leader that ever thinks they want to move on to something different than what they're doing right now. I love this. The Bible says that when David left the shepherd field to go to his brothers, to the battlefield, the Bible says that first he found someone to care for the sheep. Then he went to the field to visit his brothers, and we know he took down Goliath. So remember this, never leave the assignment God has you in right now unless you find someone else to care for it. Tend to what God's called you to now, and then God will move you to something different.
You mentioned several times throughout, what you were just sharing, the stories that you've battled with insecurity, and I don't think there's a leader on the planet that hasn't. Now you've written the book, right? You've proved the critics wrong. Right? You overcame rejection. But I'm just curious, what have you learned, and what are you learning about overcoming insecurity as a leader?
Whew, yeah, I haven't overcome insecurity as a leader. I feel insecure every time I see a leader with a lot of hair, to be honest, because I don't have any underneath the hat. And so, like, I'm still trying to figure out how to lead in my own skin. Like, I look at it's so hard in the media day and age we live in, with preachers online, with comparing everybody all the time. And the moment you go on Instagram, you see everybody else is preaching clips, and you can feel not good about your own. It's a day and age where it's so easy to feel insecure. For me, what I'm pressing into more is just realizing that God has created me uniquely. And if I embrace that I am created uniquely by God, I can be unique in what he's called me to do. And he hasn't called me like my friend, my friend, I'm not going to drop names, but I've got friends and pastors and leaders that are pastoring the largest churches in America. Well, guess what? Or writing the best-selling books in America. Well, guess what? That just may not ever be something that I do. And I think it's when you feel okay saying, God, if that's not what you have for me, that's not what I want for me. That's how I've started to overcome insecurity. It's not by chasing down what others are accomplishing. It's about finding security in what God's called me to accomplish. There's so many leaders out there in today's day and age that are trying to chase down being the next Michael Todd, right? The next guy who's blowing up on Instagram out of nowhere, or the next Stephen Furtick who 10 years ago blew up, or you name it. And these are friends. These are great, well, Stephen is. These are great men of God that I admire, and I celebrate what God's doing. They are blowing up for Jesus, and God is using them in magnificent ways. But it's not for me now to wait for my next chance or my opportunity to do that. And I think if leaders stop chasing down what others are doing and just say, God, use me how you want to use me, I promise that the recipe of every leader that leaders are chasing down, at the recipe of that leader that they're chasing down was a broken heart submitted to what God had for them. And that's why God's using them in that way. So I would say, for me, it's helped me to just simply say, whatever, God, I don't have someone I'm trying to be like. I don't have somewhere I'm trying to go. I don't have something I'm trying to accomplish other than just use me, God. I'm going to be faithful every day. I'll just going to stay faithful, and I'll let you worry about the fruitfulness and where you take it.
I love that. And I feel like those insecurities in comparison can lead to external pressure, but you also lead an organization that's grown a lot in the past decade. And I'm just curious, leadership comes with a lot of stress, a lot of weight, a lot of responsibility. I'm sure you've had sleepless nights with that. I'm just curious, what do you do to actually handle all of that?
Yeah, I have a great team. And I know that sounds cliche, but honestly, I have surrounded myself. I'm not that sharp. I'm just really not. Like, I get around other guys that are doing what I'm doing, and I'm like, don't compare yourself, because like, I know I can hit a driver better than them on the golf course, but I'm not
Nice.
sure I can do much else better than them, right? So for me,
Yeah.
it's like, but I have adopted the truth of surrounding yourself with people that are just better at what you're not good at, right? So I surround myself with those types of people. So on our team, man, we just got some really sharp people that carry the burden with me. And I haven't always been good at carrying the burden and the sleepless nights. But things like this virus that we've all gone through, man, if it's taught us anything, it's taught us that this is God's kingdom, that this is God's church, and that this is still what he's in control of. And if it's taught me anything, it's taught me that I can let go of what God has allowed me to manage, and remember that he's still the owner of it. It's when we try to own what he's called us to manage that we carry a burden that we shouldn't carry. Of a hero of mine, friend of mine, mentor, Gordon MacDonald. He's in his 80s now. He's written some great books, and we're just super close. And I got together with him. I was super stressed a couple years ago, and he looks at me, he goes, Josh, he looks across the table. He goes, do me a favor. I said, what's that? He goes, open up your hands. So I opened up my hands. He goes, just like that. And I'm like, all right, I know you're getting old, but I think you just finally lost it. He just goes, I bet that's how your Father in heaven likes to see them. I bet that's how he likes to see your hands when it comes to the things he's asked you to manage. And I thought, all right, I'll get better. And so, open hands when it comes to what God's called us to manage, recognizing that He's the owner of it, we're just the manager of it, allows that burden to get placed back on the owner's shoulders and not on the manager's.
Yeah, can you speak more about that, into letting go and letting your team? What have you learned about building great teams and leading? And I'm just curious, if you have a great team around you, what do you primarily focus on? Like, what are your top responsibilities?
Yeah, culture. And so I think the reason we have a great team, and I do think we have a great staff, we focus more on culture than we do vision. I think one of the difficulties within the church or any organization for a long time was vision, 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 vision. Everybody's writing books on vision, have a vision. And for me, I think vision is pointless outside of a culture that can carry it, right? So culture would be the foundation that vision stands on. You can tell me where you want to go, and you can tell me your dreams, you can tell me your hopes, you can tell me how you're going to get there and the vision you have. And so we get around as leaders and we say, listen, we got to give a talk on the vision. We got to tell them the vision. We basically, what we're saying is we got to inspire them. We got to inspire them with where we're going. For me, culture is the actual ingredients that confines or that pulls together the vision. And so for me, it's the language we use. For me, it's the yes culture. For me, it's the culture of honor. It's the culture of respect. It's the culture of you never present a problem unless you have a solution. And all sorts of cultural things that we built within the ingredients of who we are. Now we can say we're heading somewhere, but we actually have the tires on the vehicle that can get us there. And I think for a long time, we talk about mission, we talk about culture. Well, oh, I'm sorry, we talk about mission, we talk about vision. Well, fine. But culture is the ingredients that helps get you there. So I would say we focus really hard on building a culture, which has allowed us to build a strong team.
And tactically on building the culture, what are some things that you do to build that culture? Is it weekly staff teachings? I'm just curious from a tactical level.
Yeah, so you would hope so. So tactically, yes, we have staff meetings or team meetings. But I would say this, and I don't want to sound like cliche. I don't want to make it too abstract. So forgive me for doing so. But when you build a strong culture through those meetings, you would hope 10 years later, the culture supports itself daily, every minute, every moment of every day, right? So you would hope that tactically, yes, we still have staff meetings and we still teach culture, but really, how do we keep the culture moving? We've taught it, we've ingrained it within the hearts of those that are here. So when you're walking down the hall, you pick up the piece of paper because it's part of our culture. When you're walking down the hall and you hear, if you were to hear the word "I can't," you would have someone come in and they would correct that culture. And so I would say it's just now, it's who we are. So let me say it to you this way. Many organizations need to develop the culture so they can become who they hope to become. Other organizations have a culture that when something from the outside steps in, it stands out like a sore thumb, right? For instance, if you were to go to Chick-fil-A, which I love, Christian chicken, and if you were to order something and you were to say thank you, and they were to respond back, "You're welcome," you immediately would hear that if you go there enough, because it's outside of their culture. They respond, "It's our pleasure, my pleasure," right? Because culturally, that's their language. So the moment someone were to say, "You're welcome," it would stand out. And everybody in the entire Chick-fil-A organization or in that building would look over at them like, what is wrong with them? So what Chick-fil-A did is they had the practical moments that taught the culture. But then remember this, it's not always that hard, because once your culture becomes who you are, now it's actually easy to manage it, because culture manages itself when it's been ingrained within the organization deep enough. Now, everybody who knows the culture takes care of the culture that takes care of those who are outside of culture, if that makes any sense. So
Yeah.
what do we do right now? We pretty much just let the work that we've done, and yes, we continue to push in on it. Yes, we continue to spit truth in on it. But more than anything right now, you just stick out like a sore thumb if you're not part of what it is we've created.
Wow. Before we go into the lightning round, I just want to shift gears. A question I've been asking leaders, because I feel like this is what God's been dealing with me about all year long, is what are you learning about leadership and rest?
Yeah. So I was actually about 2 or 3 months ago, I can't remember the exact, it was in this year. I was outside running, and I was jogging, and this book was coming out. It's Not Over was being released, and at the time I didn't even have an Instagram page. You know, now I've got all of that. I never wanted to build my own platform because I felt dirty doing it. I just wanted to be faithful. It felt kind of dirty trying to be a guy trying to build a platform. I wanted God to build it. And now he's done a pretty good job of that as of now. And I was running, I was feeling super insecure. I was feeling somewhat discouraged, and I was just praying. And I said, God, would you speak to me? Would you just speak to me? Now, some leaders out there, like, you hear from God like every day, super strong. I hear from God every day through the conviction of the Spirit speaking to me, through the guidance of the Spirit. But I'm talking like a God moment where, like, the God of heaven, you're sure that was from God. I don't get that every day. And I was running, and I felt like God said, funny you'd ask, I felt like God said, rest. Now, there's only been maybe 10 of those moments in my life, maybe less, where it was like everything stopped for a moment. Like, you just know, like God just spoke. I almost to a point where you're like, was that audible? Like, we're talking like a moment with God, and it was rest. And I'm like, rest? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, the book's coming out next week. I'm traveling the country, speaking everywhere. Rest? Like, God, and I'm running and I'm frustrated. And then I stop and I start looking up rest. And of course, we come to the moment in Scripture where Jesus says, come to me, all of you who are burdened and heavy, and I will give you rest. And I looked up that word rest. And what I loved about that word was God wasn't telling me that I needed physical rest. If you look up that word, what it means is it means peace. It means peace. And so what God is saying there is, come to me, all of you who are worried, heavy, burdened, and I will give you peace. Take upon my yoke, take upon my burden. And he says it again, and I will give you peace. And so for me, what I'm finding as I'm leading this organization, as I'm writing this book, is I don't need more sleep. I need more peace. And the only way to receive more peace is by truly trusting, once again, that God is fully in control. Like, if this book flops and I give it my all, now I'm not talking about sitting on our hands. Like, I'm totally against that. Like, I'm totally the guy that's like, listen, if you want to see something, go dig some ditches so that God can send rain. Like I always say this, pray with a shovel in hand. At the end of the day, like, don't be the dude just praying for water. Be the dude praying for water. Be the girl praying for water with a shovel in hand. And so I'm simply not saying, like, just go and just have peace and drink hot chocolate with marshmallows in it and just wait for God to move. I'm saying, get out there, shovel, write a book, hustle. But at the end of the day, if you're hustling, you're digging ditches, it's not up to you to send the rain. It's not up for you to sell books. So live in peace, knowing that God will do what God will do in your life. Like, God's got this. And if he doesn't do what you hoped he'd do, it's still okay, because he's probably doing more in you now than he's doing through you, so that he can do more through you in another season.
Yeah. Before we dive into the lightning round, is there anything else you want to say about the book? Where can people find it? And anything else you want to leave leaders with regarding It's Not Over?
No, just, you can buy it anywhere books are sold. Amazon. It's a pretty good book.
Yeah, so we'll include links in the show notes. We encourage everyone listening to this, go buy a copy right now. And don't just buy a copy for yourself. Think of 5 other leaders that you could impact with the book, and get a copy for them as well. So Joshua, the time we have left, we're diving into the lightning round, just a bunch of fun questions I love to ask leaders. And the first one is, what is the best advice you've ever received, and who gave it to you?
Wow. All right, first thing that came to my mind was I was talking to Craig Groeschel, and it was probably 8 years ago. We were on the phone talking, and he said, wherever you are, be all there. And this was in a season where we had just planted the church. I was struggling to be a dad of a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. I felt like I'd be at home, but I'd be there, but I wouldn't be there. As leaders, we know what I'm saying. My mind is somewhere else. And be wherever you are, be all there. And so I would say that that's some of the best advice I've ever gotten as a leader, because it's allowed me to live in every moment. I think the greatest gift we can give anyone as a leader or as a person is our presence. I think our presence is the greatest gift we can give someone.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being all here for this interview. It's going awesome so far. If you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
It's not over.
Yeah. That's awesome. What is the best purchase you've made in the last year for $100 or less, other than the book It's Not Over?
I was just gonna say, well, you took that away from
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
I would say the best purchase I've made would be the green tip worm for bass fishing. It's been killing it for me there on the lakes.
I love it, man. Here's another one. Other than your own book, what's the number one book you give away most often or has impacted you lately?
I love the book, of course, by Gore McDonald. He's a hero of mine. Ordering Your Private World, I'd say, is the one that I've been giving away. I've always given away the most. I'm drawing a blank on one that I'm reading right now that I really. What's the book I'm reading now? Water to Wine.
Okay.
Zan. It's definitely like it's one of those books that you have to filter your own beliefs through, right? But I like those type of books. I don't like the books that just align with everything I think. I like the books that cause me to actually like, okay, this is good. There's attention. So Water to Wine is something I'm reading right now that's on point.
If you listen to podcasts, what are your go-tos?
Oh, Craig Rochelle Leadership, the Joshua Gagnon Leadership podcast. Just kidding.
That's right. Hey, you can promote your own. It's great.
Adam Weber. I'm looking at my top ones right now. Carrie Newhoff's a good close friend of mine. Andy Stanley, and then I like the crime ones. I like the crime ones. You guys like those? You get in any of those?
I have not. No.
Oh, come
I
on,
still
you got to liven your podcast.
recommend one. I'll download it today. What recommend your top crime podcast? Let's go.
Bear Brook. That's legit. That's a good one. You got to have some fun podcasts on that list, right?
Are they like murder mysteries? Or are they true stories? Like
true stories.
True stories.
Watching it's like watching 48 Hours or Unsolved Mysteries. My parents used to watch that when I was a kid. That music kept me up at night, man.
I'm with you, man. Yeah, I couldn't sleep. That and The Exorcist. I couldn't anyway. I don't know how I saw that movie before I was like 10, but anyway. What do you wish people knew about your journey that they may not know?
We worked really hard to get here. I think a lot of times people look from the outside and they think to themselves, like, I want to do that or I want to see that. And I think the closer I've had the opportunity of getting to some of the people that we all look up to, the more you realize nothing's been handed. And the other thing is nothing's quick. Most people are like 30-year success stories or 10-year success stories. Bethel Music is a big band in the Christian world. And I read something that was like 15 to 20 years before they ever were known. And it's like, we consider an overnight success story, and so I think it's a lot of hard work and it's not an overnight success story. There's a lot of faithfulness, a lot of tears, a lot of brokenness, a lot of fight, a lot of moments of disbelief, a lot of moments of doubt, but it's getting up, cleaning off your shoes and going to work again.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite failure in your journey that led to success in the long run?
I would say just because we're thinking about the book, I would say failing on that first book led to this book, which I think God's been using it in big ways. There was a time, if you got 30 seconds, there was a time where I was in a meeting upstairs and I'm a pretty passionate person. Like I played basketball, I played sports. And when you get in the locker room, you like yell at each other, come on, we got this. And I can remember it was about maybe 8 years ago. There was a weekend where the air conditioning went off and nobody was prepared and the stage stunk and everybody was, and I was so frustrated. I called a meeting. And at the time we may have had only like 13 staff or something. And I called a meeting, I brought them in. I was like, this can't happen. What is going on? And I took like a board and I didn't like throw it at anyone. I put it hard down on the desk. I was so mad, almost like a coach, right? Now my heart wasn't like impure, but I was just, and I got done that meeting and one of my executive team members said, Pastor, we know your heart, but the bigger this gets, you have to remember not everybody does. Wow. And so they see you in that moment as someone who's angry and uncontrolled and frustrated, but they don't see you cry. They don't see you praying. They don't see the character. They just now see the person. So you have to be careful. I would say it was a pretty big failure that day. I didn't do anything lacking integrity. I didn't have this big moment, but I look at that a lot and I remember that that's the moment I changed the way I led, where I remembered that people have to have to see my character before they're going to trust me in my imperfections. And so I have to make sure that I lead people different. I can't lead the new hire the way I lead the person who's been here 10 years. The person who's been here 10 years knows my heart. And I could say, come on, we got to what are we doing? I could say that. And they're going to be like, you got it, man, because they know my heart. They know that I'm on the field bleeding with them. But the new hire that I look at and say, come on, we got to get better. They're feeling failure and they're seeing me as upset, and I'm not. So I had to learn in that moment that Josh, if you're gonna lead for the long run, you're gonna have to make sure you lead people by the level they know your inner character.
You get to spend time with a lot of great leaders. You've mentioned several on the podcast. Do you have a go-to question or two that you always ask, no matter who you get a meeting with?
Yeah, I always ask about their heart, like what's God teaching you? How did you overcome insecurity, or how are you overcoming insecurity? So I always ask questions. I never ask, and I mean this too. When I say the word never, like I never ask ministry questions. Never. I don't even care. Like I don't care. I don't even care what's working in California right now, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me. Like I really don't even care what's working up the road right now, if I'm being honest, because I'm just gonna, I'm all about wisdom, but we're just gonna keep, doing what we're doing the best we can do it. What I care about is how to get to the end of this thing with a marriage that's still, on fire, with kids that still love me and Jesus. I just want to figure out how to be whole as a man. I think the greatest problem we're ever going to face is leaders who are broken as men, but look whole as leaders. And I think that's a dangerous, dangerous reality to live in.
What's your greatest leadership pet peeve?
Bringing problems without solutions. So I can't stand being in meetings where everybody's talking about the problem, but nobody has a solution. So we have a rule on our team. You're welcome to bring problems, but you have to have 2 solutions for every problem. And they don't have to be the solutions we go with, but you're not going to show up empty-handed. There's nothing worse than someone that sees all of the problems but never has a solution. And so we want to create a culture. So my biggest pet peeve would be those problem finders, but not solution finders.
Do you have any unusual habits that make you successful?
I sleep like 19 hours a day, and I'm only awake for, no, just kidding.
That's amazing. Teach me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know what any leadership habits would be. I think it's hard because I think that I just am who I am. Leadership habits. I would say one of my leadership habits, if you were to ask it, if I look into it, I would just say I'm a friend. I lead with who I am, and I lead how I am. There was a day where I used to think I needed to, for instance, preach a certain way or have my message like Andy Stanley prepared 17 months in advance. And the more I got to realize that I'm Josh Gagnon and I work more in the moment than I do out ahead when it comes to message preparation, it's okay. And so I would say when it comes to leadership, I'm the same way. I'm kind of in the moment. Like a habit I have is stepping in everybody's office and just asking how they're doing. And I kind of lead in those moments. Like I don't necessarily have to call a meeting to lead, but I try to just get in every moment in everybody's life. And I just throw in little leadership things. So I think a habit I have is the day is a day of leadership opportunity, not meetings or opportunities.
What's something you crossed off your bucket list that everyone should do?
Iceland.
What?
Iceland.
Iceland. Everyone should go to Iceland.
Everyone should go to Iceland. I was just talking about this morning. Iceland. If you haven't been to Iceland, you probably will miss out on some of the greatest views in swimming in hot rivers and just beauty. So Iceland. I crossed it off my bucket list.
What's one thing left on your bucket list?
Hunting elk.
Nice.
I want to go hunting for elk.
Love it. If you could go back with your 20-year-old self, what would you tell 20-year-old Josh?
I would say you're going to overestimate what God can do in the immediate, and you're going to underestimate what God can do through a lifetime of faithfulness. I'd say, Josh, would you calm down a little bit? You're psycho. Like chill out. Like God gave you a dream that's way too big for you to accomplish in a year. So why in the world are you putting the pressure on yourself to accomplish it in a year? I would say calm down. You think everything's going to happen in the next 6 months. Chill out. Just be faithful. Just stay faithful and watch what God can do in a lifetime of faithfulness. You're going to overestimate what he's going to do daily, but you're going to underestimate what he could do through a life of faithfulness daily.
And after a lifetime of faithfulness, looking back, what do you want to be remembered for?
Being a good dad, being a good husband, being a good friend. I don't really care if people thought I was a good preacher. Honestly, I don't really care. Being a good leader, I'd like them to look back at me in the office days and being like, when I was broken and my marriage was hurting, this pastor who had a big staff came over. Like, last year, one of our new staff members' basement was flooding. And I went over and I helped shovel it out with baskets and stuff. And he was like, "I can't believe you'd be here." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Where else would I want to be?" So I think the problem with celebrity preachers and pastors is they become a celebrity in their own environment. And that's dangerous. And I have no desire to be that. And I'm not that. So I think when it's all over, I just want people to say, like, he was just a good friend. He was just a real authentic man. And my kids love me and my wife loves me.
Anything else you want to leave leaders with today?
You're doing better than you think you are. You're doing better than you think you are. Stop putting all the pressure on yourself. Stop trying to accomplish today what God's called you to accomplish in a lifetime of faithfulness, and stop giving up in the delay, because God's delays are not God's denials.
Well, Josh, this was a great interview. I hope everyone goes out and buys your book. And thank you so much for your time this morning. And thank you for being all here.